Music has always been able to respond to crises. Whether political, pandemic, or personal, music has the power to comfort or challenge, to find new meaning or attack the status quo. Contemporary music may seem inaccessible, academic, or even ugly at first, but so many powerful emotions, messages, atmospheres, affects, and ideas are hidden behind its rough facade. We are on a journey to find out how composers since the Second World War deal with a world in crisis, inviting today's musicians to react to the COVID era.
As some composers went inside themselves for the answer to crisis, others could not remain silent. They spoke out, demanded answers and change in the world around them.
People these days. They think everything's so easy, but they just forget, and that's really annoying. That things just happen, while they know damn well that it's not at all the case. They just forget that in most cases, it's just completely not the case. Even a guy you'd at least think that he, even just a little bit, would just use common sense. As usual, just too inadequate. In such a case, it's terrible how unbelievably such simple cases are messed up. Just think about it for once.
It's fascinating to see how many composers use their music as a political tool. Here in the Netherlands, during the turbulent 60s and early 70s, art and politics started to merge together more and more. This led to a few very memorable moments. For instance, Actie Tomaat, Operation Tomato. A few theater students started throwing tomatoes at the stage during a performance, and this was their way of protesting against the institutionalized arts funding. And they thought it just led to conservative programming, and they thought something had to change. And not much later, the musical community followed as well. A couple of young Dutch composers interrupted a concert of the Concertgebouw Orkest in Amsterdam. They started to make all kinds of percussive noises during the concert, and the concert had to stop. And they too wanted to change the artistic, the musical landscape here.
This resulted in all sorts of powerful compositions. For example, Louis Andriessen, he wrote a hilarious speech for spoken word and trombone. And most notably, the reconstructie. And this is about the murder of Che Guevara.
Yeah, this was a big opera. And what was so interesting about it, it was written by 5 composers who worked together.
And 2 writers.
And 2 writers, an almost communist way of all pitching in and coming to one big project together. And of course, this theme was very politically charged.
Yeah, definitely. And in the end, there were even parliamentary questions asked over there.
It drives me crazy. And if that doesn't change, if there isn't very soon, finally, somewhat decent results, then I'm going to... Because I've said it a million times, it is completely not. Isang Yun studied composition in Tokyo when the Pacific War started in 1941. He moved back to Korea to join the independence movement. The Japanese captured him and tortured him. After the war, when Yun was released, he founded an orphanage and started teaching throughout Korea. A decade later, Yun traveled to Europe to continue his studies. It was here that Igor Stravinsky, Hans Werner Henze and other big names started to notice his work. After a few years of success in Europe, the South Korean Secret Service kidnapped him for alleged acts of espionage. He was taken back to South Korea, where he was tortured for the second time in his life. He was threatened with the death sentence and even attempted suicide, but he never stopped writing music. Under pressure of worldwide protests and a petition signed by more than 300 artists, including Stockhausen, Ligeti, Stravinsky and von Karajan, the South Korean government released him. He returned to Germany as a political refugee and was never allowed to go back to his home country again.
Yun is one of the very few composers who is accepted and celebrated in both North and South Korea.
Yeah, he really succeeded in bridging gaps in his music. And that's a very powerful statement, but one of unity and peace. After being imprisoned, tortured and having severe mental breakdowns, he still refused to give way to anger in his life. If I play this music, I can really feel the pain and the struggle, but he's always searching for harmony and connection. In the Oost-West miniaturen for cello and oboe, Yun really tries to connect the Eastern and the Western culture. We have the beautiful oboe line with all the strange but nice glissandi representing the Eastern culture, and we have the Western culture represented by the more traditional cello part. And I recorded this fantastic piece with Ketevan Roinishvili, and she is a Georgian cello player, and I'm obviously Dutch. So in a way we also represent the Eastern and the Western culture.
But now, go. Speeding past the abyss of fear and risk, of course. Everywhere and straight through. Really, cutting through. Everything. Everything. Without looking back, without even taking a second to. Just plowing ahead with an endless, straight through. Exactly. I could add to this, but I think if I did, then it would somewhat, maybe it would be somewhat less technical. But anyway, I still believe. Right. Thank you.
Everyone seems to have an opinion about everything these days. Some people feel the need to voice their opinion without actually listening to each other. And this is quite telling for the times we live in. You have to shout louder and louder just to be heard.
This sentiment is captured beautifully in the piece by Trevor Grahl, Bubblebox, he wrote for us. And in this piece we make all kinds of weird chattery noises, and most of the time we just go through each other without actually listening to each other, or it sounds like that. And there's times when we find each other, but most of the times we just go through each other without listening.
So the piece that I did end up writing for them pays homage to, social media trolls and these big long exchanges that you can read where everybody has their, no accountability. They just say their 2 cents and then it's there. So it was kind of a musical embodiment of that phenomenon. We were watching the American presidential debates at that time. That was November 2020. And something that occurred to all of us at the same time was, maybe this could be, a sort of an argument or a debate. And so watching the American presidential debates, we really had this feeling that nobody was really saying much, but they were, talking. And thus came the idea of Bubblebox, which is Dutch for somebody that talks a lot and doesn't say much, or a chatterbox.